Josh, how are you?
Doing great, guys. How are you?
We're doing fantastic. Hold on, just having a technical difficulty
iPad
real
problems. I know
quick
the deal. It's all good.
as technology trying to figure it out. We got these fancy iPads are not working. I explain. I've been to the Baseball Hall of Fame a few times. I'm very fortunate that my grandfather who played Major League Baseball, he was the MVP in '47. You guys got a couple of his things there, and I've been down to the bowels and just seeing just a little bit of what you guys have there. I try and explain to people who are from the Bay Area. I'm like, Cooperstown's like a little mini Lake Tahoe. The lake's beautiful. The town's around the lake. This time of the year, I know you've gotten a lot of snow, but there's just something special, just not the museum, about the town that makes the whole experience just magical.
Yeah, I mean, and what's funny is I tell people all the time that I'm not sure there's another place in America like it. So I've never heard anybody compare it to Tahoe, but that doesn't. I've been to Tahoe and I can see that. I mean, it is in fact, in my mind, way more than the Baseball Hall of Fame. That's obviously what we're known for, and certainly that's the reason I'm talking to you guys. But
Yeah.
there is so many cool things about the Main Street, about life on the lake, and about just small town America. I mean, it is the quintessential American village. And frankly, if you've got any listeners out there who have not visited, I just can't tell. Every people put it on their bucket list, and then when they finally come do it, they're blown away by how it exceeds their expectations. It's that cool. And
And
I
it
live
doesn't
here. It's
matter.
pretty neat.
Yeah, I mean, I did the ceremony in '99 with Brett, Ryan, and Yount and Cepeda. So you can go at that time of the year, or you go in the fall when the leaves are changing. I mean, it's just breathtaking whenever you get there. And I'm so happy for this class this year. Fred McGriff is a guy that I've been doing this a long time, but I was a fan first as a kid growing up when Fred McGriff was in Toronto. I was in high school and then throughout college. And then early in my career was the end of his career. So I got to see him as a fan and I got to see him doing this for a living. And I'm so happy because he's such a great individual. He's a great guy. You talk to all the people said he was so good for our game. When Fred McGriff got in, how'd that make you feel?
Well, it was really cool, and for a number of reasons. One, I mean, you don't see a whole lot of people get to that point of the era committee process and get a 16 out of 16 votes. That's just very rare. I think that the reason why often they're there is that there might be some disagreements on whether people feel like they belong in the Hall of Fame, and so obviously you still have to reach that 75% threshold. But I thought it was really really cool that we had somebody who was unanimous, and it certainly happened before. A lot of times with managers or those who are just getting on there for the first time. But I also, on a personal note, I was fortunate enough to work with him in 2003 with the Dodgers, and he was going to LA to hit number 500. I was going to be there for it. I had never seen anybody hit 500, so I was really excited. And unfortunately, it didn't happen. He wound up getting hurt, and I think he needed 21 homers, and he got like 12 or whatever it was. But I just remember we would go to him because he was this guy on the chase for 500. We'd go to him all the time for requests, and I can picture his face every time I would go to him. He'd give me like a very quizzical look, like what do you need? And then he'd break into this huge grin, and I just remember he had this huge grin, and he did everything very, as you said, he was a professional. Everybody in the game wanted to see him get in. He's just a great human, and he had an unbelievable baseball career, and I was really, really happy for him when he crossed that threshold.
And also Scott Rowland, terrific player, the defender, the bat. Obviously, the way we now look at baseball more than ever, with analytics, kind of changed the way we look at players. And very happy for Scott because when you go through this process, you start to realize certain positions haven't got as much love as other positions, and one of those positions is third base.
Yeah, there's no doubt. There seem to be less third basemen for whatever reason. I mean, there's. I think people have their theories, but I do think that whether it's modern analytics or even, I mean, you look back at some of the, take somebody like Ozzie Smith or others who have gotten in maybe because they were either defensive players or two-way players. I don't think it's unheard of that a guy's defense should help him get over the hump, but I think because he wasn't Mike Schmidt necessarily offensively. It took him longer to get to that point, but it's been pretty amazing to watch even before I got to the Hall of Fame. Have him go from whatever it was, 10 or so percent of the vote to 75 in 6 years is really cool. And I think it shows you what this process is. I think the writers take it very seriously. Fans strong opinions on every argument. It is amazing. Every day in fact, I got one yesterday that you guys can appreciate. I got an email, an actual handwritten letter about Gene Tennis. And if I look at Gene Tennis, I would realize, and and this person was so adamant about why Gene Tennis belonged in the Hall of Fame. And our job is not to have an opinion one way or another. It's to set up a process and let others vote. And then we honor those who cross that 75% threshold.
Well, I want to get into it with you about how the presentation has become so spectacular. It's like everything else in life. Like, we remember the NFL draft. You picked up the paper and you found out who the team drafted. And now it's this television production. Cities are vying for it. I mean, everything's changed. I think what the MLB Network does with this whole process and having Brian Kinney and MLB Now there for 3 days, I thought it was phenomenal. And of course, your interview. But back to the process. I think for us broadcasters, we think about, and especially when I got into this business in the late 90s, there were still a tremendous amount of baseball writers. There were still a lot of calmness. Papers were still thriving, but they were just starting to be in trouble. And now we know where the newspaper business is, and it's sad. I was always a newspaper guy. I wanted to go out and pick it up in the morning and read the sports page, but just it's sad that we're not there anymore. And so many of the great writers have left us, or they've retired. A lot, the way the newspapers started gobbling each other up, so many lost their jobs. Just the baseball writer and who the baseball writer is has completely changed. We now have writers voting who have never written for a newspaper. They've only been online. Have you thought about, just because the way the job of the newspapers has changed and the writers have changed, have you thought about changing the process? Because that's one thing you guys do control. I try and tell people all the time, you're independent of Major League Baseball.
Yeah.
You guys run your show. Have you thought about, broadcasters? I mean, to think that Bob Costas doesn't have a vote, or Vin Scully never had a vote. Have you ever thought about changing the process to be more than just writers? Because as we know, committees have elected more guys in the Hall of Fame than actually the writers.
Well, yeah, I mean, we think all the time. I mean, honestly, all the time we're having debates internally here about what is the best possible process. And I think to this point, we have not felt that the baseball writers aren't the best process for that first run, for that first 10 years. As you know, it used to be 15 years, and it used to be that .com people weren't part of the BBWAA. But I think as that entity continues to evolve, and welcome in other people who aren't dyed-in-the-wool newspaper writers. And I should start by saying my father was a dyed-in-the-wool newspaper writer and eventually an editor, and my mom taught journalism forever. So I mean, I come from that. I think that group does an incredible job of really analyzing what's out there. Does that mean that broadcasters would do a less good job? Not necessarily. But we have quite often broadcasters who end up on the ERA committee, who will sit in that room of 16 and be part of it. I can remember Jaime Jarrín had just sat in that room last year, and any number of others over the years who are considered part of our historian group. So up to this point, we have not really honestly entertained the idea that the BBWAA wouldn't do what they've done, but that doesn't mean that we'll never consider other people's thoughts or ideas, proposals. I mean, for every positive argument you have about one group, you have the pushback on the other side. And the thing we always hear about broadcasters is that they're too close to it. Yes, they see a lot of games, but they're biased. They can't look at this the way a journalist would look at it from an unbiased perspective. And I'm not saying that's true or false. I just know that every time someone says, why don't the broadcasters get a vote? The argument I hear on the opposite side is, well, because they're fans, and fans should be somebody who doesn't have a vested interest. And how could Vin Scully vote against a Dodger? I think there's probably some truth to that. I knew Vin very, very well, and I can't imagine he would have done a whole lot of, I don't think that guy belongs in there. I'm not going to put him in. So I don't know. It's a great question without a real easy answer, because I think for every argument on one side, you get the one on the other. But we think right now the system works pretty well with two systems, two different avenues to get in, the BBWAA and the ERA committees.
There was an interesting article recently in the USA Today, and it's coming out again. It's being reprinted in Sports Weekly, their monthly edition, about the steroid era may be getting away from the Baseball Hall of Fame. I know there's going to be the suspicion of certain guys, Veterans Committee. You're still going to have some guys on the list that have tested positive before, but do you feel that we're getting closer to getting away from that cloud and it's blowing away from Cooperstown?
I mean, I guess it depends on how you. I mean, if you're only looking at it strictly from an election standpoint, I mean, certainly, I think a lot that period of time where testing wasn't in place, or where you saw a lot of the names that are most commonly cited as tied to that era. A lot of those people are in fact coming off of the BBWAA ballot. But every 3 years, we're going to be looking at the 1980 and forward group. So I think a lot of names who either have suspicions or who have tested positive, or for whatever other reason, I think they're going to continue every few years to get looked at, as they should, because I do think it's important that we continue to look at everybody who's eligible in MLB's eyes. But I think the thing that most fans probably don't realize, and I know you do because you've been here, but I mean, this isn't just a single hallway with plaques. I mean, we're talking about a 3-story museum here that actually has an entire case on the PED era and talks all about what that meant to baseball. And we've got interactives where people can weigh in with their opinions on whether they feel that's okay and was just part of the game, or whether it would change their perspective on someone. And you could make the same argument for the sign stealing scandals of recent years, or of the 1951. I mean, there have been so many of these controversies over the years that's what people love to debate. So I suppose in a way we're not going to hear about it every single year, because a lot of those names came off of the baseball writers ballot. But I think every 3 years for sure, you're going to continue to hear that conversation. And that's okay. That we don't shy away from it. We really want to be the repository of history, the good, the bad, the ugly, all of it.
And I know it changes throughout time, but I've talked to people about it, the timeline. When you're walking the timeline and you're seeing like some of the Yankees' wives' charms, their charm bracelets that they used to give the charms for World Series and All-Star games. My grandfather was in 7 All-Star games, so I have one of my grandmothers. You have the license plate of Cy Young. I mean, all the different things that are in this timeline. That's what people, and that's why I recommend, going for a ceremony, and if it's your guy, your player is great, but it's so crowded. That's why I've always recommended the fall is so beautiful, because the leaves are turning, but you want to be able to stand in front of something that you really want to read and be in and really get to know everything about it without having thousands of people on you. Fall's a great time of the year, and that's one of the things about the museum is that if you have that kind of time, it's going to take you a few days to take it all in. I still love, one of my favorite things is all the World Series rings, to see all the World Series rings throughout the years. I mean, the stuff you guys have is just spectacular.
Well, thank you. I honestly feel like I couldn't say it better myself. I mean, when you have someone like you who's been there, we encourage people to come for induction weekend, but that's 1 out of 52 weekends. And there's so many other amazing times to come here, even literally right now. I mean, there's no snow coming down. Is it cold? Sure. But we had, I don't know, 50 people in the museum today who basically had the run of the place. And that there's incredible value in being able to take your time over a couple of days, stand around in an exhibit for 3, 4, 5 hours and feel like, okay, you know what, I'm going to do the second floor on this day and the third floor on that day, and come down to the plaque gallery before. I mean, there is a lot to see and do here. And I love your perspective on it, because you're saying exactly what I always say every time I do these interviews. So appreciate you teeing that up. The collection is epic. And in fact, when people ask me all the time, what are one of my favorite artifacts, one of the things I often cite is literally the one you just said, the Gehrig charm bracelet. Just kind of boggles my mind that's, and every single one of these things, they're literally priceless. I mean, you cannot even put a value on what that would go for on the open market. And it's just one of 40,000 artifacts that we have. And so we don't like to talk about the value. It's not really about the value. They're all priceless. They are truly history in our hands. It's pretty cool.
That's the whole thing about like, you're like going to the Babe Ruth exhibit, and I remember there was a trophy of Babe Ruth hitting a hole in one. It's like, where do you get? And that's why the Cy Young thing, because personalized license plates became something big, like what, late 70s, the 80s. Cy Young was rolling. It's C511Y. He was, whatever year it was, he was rolling with a personalized license plate. That always stood out to me. Another thing I want to bring up, because a couple of my buddies have done it, where their kids, youth baseball, you've got these complexes that are just kind of outside Cooperstown where
Mhm.
youth baseball teams come from all over the country and compete against each other. And then all these kids get to come to the Baseball Hall of Fame. Just how important is that for our youngsters to be able to come, play, and then really see the history of the game to help us grow the game?
Oh man, you just nailed it. And I was very lucky for years when I was with the Diamondbacks. We always talked with my son that 2022 we were going to get to play in Cooperstown, and then sure enough, we moved here, and his team from Arizona came out last year. So I got to experience that whole thing as a parent. He stayed and played with his Arizona buddies, and it's unbelievable. I mean, they first of all they get to play for a week in some of these incredibly manicured fields, and you get to stay on the base and bunk up and all that. It really is an unreal experience for the kids that can do it. But then, yeah, to be able to come over here and spend time, and we quite often we have like scavenger hunts that they can walk around and try to find a bunch of artifacts. I mean, frankly, the biggest challenge is that because their baseball schedule when they come here, they'll have 5, 6 games in a week, sometimes 8 or 9 games in a week, and trying to find 5 hours to come to the hall is a challenge. So quite often they're coming and trying to squeeze a visit into 2, 3 hours. And I don't recommend that for anybody unless you really are coming and don't have any other time. But yeah, those tournaments are responsible for bringing tens of thousands of people to Cooperstown every year. And I give them credit because they help us spread the love of baseball. And I actually had the head of one of those tournaments recently say to me, if our tournament was in New Jersey, we're not getting these kind of numbers. I mean, people are coming here because it is Cooperstown, because they want to take their kids to the Hall of Fame. And because when you come with your family, I mean, the thing we talk a lot about here at the Hall is connecting generations. And so quite often you'll see grandparents will come along with the parents for that week in Cooperstown, and then all of them are coming to Cooperstown together. And it's just an unbelievable family trip that people will remember for as long as they live.
You know, when you're in our business and you're watching television and you're watching something like this and you look at kind of like the green screen effect behind me, it's the Oakland Coliseum, it's the sets that are always, when you see Jason Stark, Ford C. Frick Award winner, and our buddy JP Morosi, and you got Brian Kinney, all three of those guys have been on the show many a times, but you're seeing them in the plaque room. And you just see how beautiful the wood is with the plaques, very understated, with the lights right on the plaques. And MLB Network's doing those shows. You came on the show. Uh, to me, it's the best background literally in television, maybe other than what we're going to see this weekend where we are at Pebble Beach, where they're Pebble Beach pretty spectacular.
Not
But
bad.
that set right there, when MLB Network's there for 3 days, I think it's so important to help grow our game and help to grow the Hall of Fame and give people an idea what they need to come see. Just talk about that relationship between the network and you guys and how it's benefited both.
Well, it's honestly, we can't say enough good things about the network because, frankly, that everything you just described came from COVID. We used to do the announcement down in Manhattan. Or actually Secaucus at the MLB Network studios. And when we couldn't really get everybody into one place, we did the announcement from here. And everybody went, man, look at how beautiful that is.
Yeah.
And then this year, to MLB Network's credit, they added an extra day and they did a whole nother day worth of shows out here. And so, I mean, they have done an incredible job, not just with the announcement. At this time of year, they cover the announcement wall to wall in December with the era committees, and then they come out for the Classic weekend when we do the MLB Classic in May, which is Memorial Day every weekend. They're standing right there. John Pomerosi's broadcasting from the dugout from the old timers game we play, and then on induction weekend, they're standing there during the parade on Main Street, interviewing fans and interviewing players. And then, of course, the big day on the induction ceremony, they do an amazing job. So, I mean, I can't say enough great words about what they do because they genuinely care about it. And I think anybody who's watched their coverage knows that. And yeah, we thank them quite a bit for doing it. And I genuinely appreciate you sharing that with your listeners and viewers because it just is. This place is someplace really special, and it does exist. As you said, we're not an MLB funded entity. We're our own little nonprofit in Central New York that most people don't realize has to fundraise and do all the things we do to be able to operate. And it's an amazing. I've only been here 18 months, but man, is it an amazing place to live and work.
Well, I can just tell you, it was. I was still in college at the time here in the Bay Area. It was in the early '90s, and my mom reached out to the I can't remember the man's name who was the president at the time. And we went there as a family. So there at the Baseball Hall of Fame, you guys got my grandfather's bat and ball for his 2000th hit. You got
Wow.
uniforms. You can look at Bob Elliott. He was the first third baseman ever to be the MVP in baseball in 1947 was my grandfather. So I know
Wow.
I remember the MVP wing, his name's there. And we went there and went down below. And I tell people all the time, it was like the men who are bringing the bat and the ball out there in white coats, white gloves, handing you, and you're just like, and I remember a bunch of stuff had just arrived. It was Mark McGuire. It was
Wow.
just like, it was like stuff you were like, I can't believe this is real, because you see all the stuff in the hall, but and I know you guys have built more storage other places. I don't know where, but I know I've been down below, and it's just like, oh, it's like, it's almost like you're at the FBI or something. I mean, everything's so sacred, perfect. But
Yeah, you nailed it. I mean,
do you ever get a chance? I mean, I know you haven't been there that long, but you ever get a chance just by yourself? Just you're there, you're just walking through. It's just you and John Madden's always said at the Football Hall of Fame in Canton, Ohio, he believes at night the bus talk to each other. Have you ever been in there in the plaque room and walking around the Hall of Fame by yourself, just going, wow?
Oh my God, it happens almost every day, because I generally am here before it opens, and then I leave after it closes. And you absolutely feel the history. You feel the spirits. I haven't heard anybody talking to me yet, but there are a number of times. There's an amazing video. If you go on our YouTube channel, you'll see a really cool video that they made all the players come to life and walk through the museum at nighttime. It's really cool. And in fact, actually, I should also say, because you're talking about the collection storage space, which is just kind of mind blowing. And that I do every once in a while go down there, but not, I mean, every time I'm down there, either to give someone a tour or to go deal with an artifact of some sort, it does kind of boggle your mind what you see in the storage. And but that's always been reserved really basically for VIPs like you and your family. We often do say, once you've donated something, we're always gonna, that's how we survive. So we're gonna make sure that the donors of these artifacts, their great grandkids, can come back someday and see it, because we want them to be able to, that's how we get them to donate this stuff. Or donors who are helping fund the museum will take some very high donors downstairs. But what we actually added in the last couple of years is a special experiences program, where if you're an A's fan, you can come and basically purchase a special A's experience, and we'll bring 4 or 5 really cool artifacts upstairs. It won't be the full-blown underground tour like you're describing, but we actually just launched our new website last week as well, and you can check out baseballhall.org. And under the special experiences, you can get that chance to look at Gene Tennis's bat right in front of you, or Ricky Henderson, a base that he might have stole, or all these amazing things that exist. We feel like there's a way to bring that to not just the grandkids of MVPs, but to the fans who want to be able to come and really help our mission. And it can be customized by team or by a number of different ways. So I'd encourage people to check that out if you're coming to visit.
Does that not have birthday, Christmas present written all over it?
All the time. We get it all the time. That's what a lot of times people do buy these as gifts. And we have a limited amount of them because we only have so many staff that can do it. But we have expanded the program in the last year, and it's really starting to, we're doing multiple of these every single day for people coming in.
Well, thank you so much for your time today. I mean, as you can tell, we're big fans of the Baseball Hall of Fame. We're always promoting it. I believe every baseball fan should get there as many times as possible, but you need to get there at least once. However you can get there, you fly into Albany, you can get there, and it is an experience of a lifetime. It's truly, I've been very fortunate traveling around the country, been to a lot of great museums. The Negro League Museum is unbelievable in Kansas City. A lot of great museums, but there is nothing like the Baseball Hall of Fame. There's nothing like it. So thank you for coming on. We appreciate it. And let's do this again during the season.
Anytime you want. Thanks, Cody. Appreciate how much you support us, and good luck to all the A's fans out there this year.